What we can say is that obviously the sensitivity of it, having been in one of the five former East German states, these are the places where the AfD, the far-right anti-immigrant and also very overtly anti-Islamist party, has been on the rise politically, is that this will be a fulcrum for sentiment ahead of the German elections that are going to take place early next year.
With our top story, at least two people, including a toddler, have been killed after a man drove a car into a crowd at a Christmas market in Germany. Up to 80 people have been injured. Hospitals in the central German city of Magdeburg were warned to expect mass casualties. A 50-year-old Saudi Arabian doctor who works in the area was arrested, and all of this was caught on video.
Leg dich hin! Leg dich hin! Die Hände auf der Rücken! Die Hände!
Well, we're joined by Nina Dos Santos, former Europe editor for CNN. Nina, good morning.
Good morning, Callum. Hi.
First of all, what do we know about what happened?
Well, what we know is that about 7 p.m. Yesterday evening, when young families in particular, and many citizens of Magdeburg and visitors were descending upon this traditional Christmas market, this 50-year-old individual of Saudi Arabian origin, who had lived in Germany, according to local officials, for quite some time and worked as a doctor there, for some reason ploughed a car into the crowds, driving through up to about 400 metres through the crowds, obviously knocking many individuals down and sadly claiming the lives of two people. There's about 60 people injured. And as you were pointing out in your introduction, Callum, tragically, one of the people who've lost their lives is a very young toddler. So we don't really know whether or not, as yet, this is an explicitly terrorist-motivated attack. But what we do know is that the German media are reporting the name of this individual as Taleb A, or Taleb Abdul Mohsen, excuse me, and social media posts under his name, German media claim, show that he expressed anti-Islamic views and that he had been warning of the Islamization of Germany and complained about persecution in the country. So he was arrested on the scene, as you said, after the car was stopped about 400 meters after ploughing into the crowd with such tragic consequences.
In terms of piecing together the details, how quickly has information come and when can we expect updates through the day-to-day, do you think?
Well, the pressure will be on for authorities because obviously this is not just an emotive time of year. This is the time when most Germans will have finished work, and that's why they would have been at this Christmas family market on a Friday afternoon. And Christmas traditional markets right across Germany have been a very sensitive point, and targets for terrorist attacks ever since the Berlin terror attack that took place and claimed 18 people's lives 8 years ago. The suspect there was originally went on a big run around Europe where he was followed by authorities. He was a fugitive for many days. I covered that case myself before eventually he was apprehended in Italy in a car park outside of Milan and was fatally shot. He was originally of Tunisian origin. He had expressed Islamic fundamentalist views and was motivated by terrorism. But this case appears to be less clear. What we can say is that obviously the sensitivity of it, having been in one of the five former East German states, these are the places where the AfD, the far-right anti-immigrant and also very overtly anti-Islamist party, has been on the rise politically, is that this will be a fulcrum for sentiment ahead of the German elections that are going to take place early next year.
Talk to us a little bit more about that and about the political context in which something like this happened. And actually, we talk about the Berlin attack of 2016, and that was electorally sensitive as well. So there are perhaps lessons that we can learn as to how this may impact elections.
Yeah, well, the context of the 2016 attack I remember quite well was because, remember about a year or so before, Angela Merkel had made that fateful political decision, which really turned the tide in terms of sentiment towards guest workers and migrants to Germany when she took in more than 1 million Syrian refugees fleeing the civil war there. And since then, these the touchy subject of immigration just hasn't politically come off the boil. Now, it seems as though Olaf Scholz, who's from the Social Democrat Party, he may well fall off his perch, lose the chancellorship in the next 2 months to come. Probably the Christian Democrats, Angela Merkel's own party, will come back and get the lion's share of the votes under the guise of her successor, Friedrich Merz, who's been taking a much more staunch stance on the issue of immigration. However, having said that, he won't get enough votes, as per the way the German political system works, to have an outright majority, and as such he'll have to rule with somebody else. But the far right will probably come in second position, largely motivated by all this anti-immigrant sentiment, and particularly in places like these eastern German states, of which Saxony-Anhalt, where Magdeburg is the capital of that state, this is where the AfD strongholds are actually crystallizing. And so the problem for whoever wins the German election next year, it's looking as though it will be the Christian Democrats, the centre-right party, with a new leader, is that they will then find themselves with the AfD in second position, probably. The AfD might even do much better after what has happened over the last couple of days with this attack, because they'll obviously be very keen to leverage that quite quickly. The traditional parties do not want to govern with the AfD. They have said explicitly they will not govern with them. So you might end up with another one of these hodgepodge coalitions, or perhaps a grand coalition between the likes of the centre-right and also the Social Democrats, with Olaf Scholz coming back in government in a more minor role.
I'm quite struck by what you say there, Nina, just by way of how politicians may use this, because I wonder if German society is open to the politicisation of an event like this, perhaps not in the immediate aftermath, but is it more in a kind of election campaign context that this will be referenced? Is that something that will sit comfortably with the political discussion in Germany?
Well, I suppose it depends which political party you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's take, for instance, the AfD. Actually, it was in Saxony-Anhalt, this part of Germany, that the AfD was actually branded a radical organization back in 2021 after they had a rally. And it was found that they had allegedly discussed all sorts of and adopted a very anti-Islamist approach explicitly, that they had used xenophobic rhetoric to such an extent where the German security forces decided that it was necessary to keep an eye on them because they were potentially so politically and societally divisive in Germany. It was in that actual state, Saxony-Anhalt, where this event has taken place. So you can imagine that the scope for radicalizing supporters of the far right in this part of Germany after what has happened yesterday, and the fact that 2 people lost their lives, one of whom was so young, you can imagine that that would be rife for political use, particularly by the far right. But there's something we haven't mentioned, and someone who isn't German, and that is Elon Musk, who's also getting in on the act, fresh from supporting Donald Trump in his bid to recapture the White House, with aplomb, by the way, and then having sort of let it be known that he might be amenable to supporting Nigel Farage again, somebody who's viewed as being on the further right of the political spectrum in this country. He's now set his sights on, potentially at least on his platform, supporting the AfD, because he just a day or so ago retweeted somebody saying, look, the AfD is the only party that can save Germany, quote unquote. And that has much alarmed many German politicians, particularly because these far right parties have tried their best to, garner a huge amount of support among young voters as well, particularly in these parts of Germany. And so Elon Musk is wading in on the debate here will really worry some of the mainstream parties here, because he has apparently appears to want to, share his political heft, even if it's just online, with the AfD to support them in their ambitions to try and get a much, much bigger share of the vote in Germany. And just for many Germans, whether you're in East Germany, where obviously the AfD support is growing at a faster pace than elsewhere, or in other parts of Germany, it's growing in Bavaria as well, which is a relatively profligate part of southern Germany. Some Germans will be worried that what this could do is essentially fracture German society, because if you look at the polls at the moment, the AfD is racing up the polls. They could get 15% of the vote, and then the mainstream parties getting somewhere between 35 and say maybe even just the low double digits. that's a real issue for fracturing German politics in the future if the AfD isn't invited into a government and can then use Marine Le Pen type tactics to say, look, we were frozen out and you, the voters who voted for us, your voices don't count.